Welcome to the Let's Give a Damn podcast. I'm your friend and host, Nick Lapara. I hope things are going swimmingly for you and yours so far in 2020. And if they aren't, know that I'm in your corner rooting for you. I'm serious. That's not a throwaway statement. I'm rooting for you. A couple of situations have happened in the last few days in my community that have reminded me how hard it is for us to ask for help and receive help when things aren't going the way that we want them to. Does anyone out there know what I'm talking about? It's so hard, but we cannot do everything. We cannot be everything. And we must get better at asking for and receiving help. It truly takes a village for us to become everything we are meant to become. Friends, I'm not going to charge you for that little piece of advice, and I do hope that little random thought connected with at least one or two of you out there. My guest today is a man I look up to quite a bit. Will Acuff and I met at our favorite cigar shop in Nashville about a year ago. We both like cigars, so that's always a great start to a friendship. But the more and more I got to know Will, I realized for sure that I wanted to share his life and story and work with you all. Will and his wife, Tiffany, started Corner to Corner a few years ago in Nashville. They started this organization believing that Nashville should be a place where all neighbors flourish, not just some. Now, Will is a Christian, so there are some Christian overtones and undertones and everything in between in this conversation. Having said that, I truly believe this conversation has something for you, whether you're religious or not. He's an amazing, amazing dude. Will and his family give so many damns, and I'm hoping our conversation sparks a fire under some of y'all's asses to love, serve, and work more intentionally in your city. Whoever you are, wherever you are. Enough chit-chat. Let's get right into my conversation with the man, the myth, the legend, Will Acuff. How much those cost?
This body is like $1,200.
Oh yeah, that's affordable.
I mean, in the world of photography,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's expensive.
Yeah,
it's someone's car out there, but
yeah.
It's
and
affordable.
It was my motorcycle.
Yeah,
because I used to. That was my stress reliever. Was long distance motorcycle touring.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like put all my camping gear on the back and just be gone.
Up until at what point?
So my son, part of our story, my son has special needs, and that has reframed our home life.
Yeah,
in kind of every way imaginable. And in the course of that, my wife started what I would describe as a war of attrition against me and the motorcycle.
Yeah,
and it felt like that. It wasn't like it felt personal.
Sure,
I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Like,
that's fine. And how did you go get through that?
So we ended up at a stalemate for a long time where she thought we were compromising. I thought I was losing. That was the motorcycle got to be in the garage. So it still existed in our life, but it was on a trickle charger.
Yep.
But I was not allowed to drive it anymore because the thought of me dying on the motorcycle and her, raising our two kids solo with the special needs kind of thrown in there was and so it just sat there for a year. And then we went to Hope Heals, the camp started by Jay and Catherine Wolf, who've been awesome in this whole journey. And in dialoguing with some of the men there, who had like been on the like special needs family journey for decades, they were just like, yeah, you need to say goodbye to that motorcycle. That was a sweet part of your life. But in order for you to like love and serve your family really well right now, that has to be over. And I was able to hear it. Sometimes you're in a place where you can hear something better. And sometimes it's not even for lack of love for our partner or our spouse, but it feels different coming from, there's so much going on in that relationship. Hopefully absolutely.
So much good and some not so good, but it feels different coming from someone else saying, okay, we've been through that. Here's how we got through it. And that's what you should do.
Yeah. It felt like they were, able to speak to me in a way that I was able to hear. And on the return from that trip, I was like, okay, when we get home, I'll sell the motorcycle. But the deal is, please, that this has to turn into another passion. Like it can't turn into diapers. And so she was like, absolutely. I just want you alive. I still want you to have passions in your life, and ways to express kind of creative output that is not related to work or your normal rhythms of life. And so right at that time, I had started falling in love with some of the Fuji street photo, like color stuff. And yeah, so this used to be a motorcycle and now it's a camera.
It's a safer motorcycle.
Yeah, for sure.
Remember when I was younger, parents, I think, especially parents that never rode motorcycles, but only hear stories about them, they're like, don't ever get on a fucking motorcycle. Like, stay off that.
It will light you on fire and stab you in the kidneys immediately.
But I remember one time, I grew up in Guatemala before we left to go live there. We lived in New York where I was born. And we were pulling up to I'll never forget this. We were pulling up to a stoplight. And, there's cop cars everywhere, lights, and everybody was stopped. And so we got stopped, and we were all going slowly down one lane. And so my dad rolled down and said, like, hey, what happened to somebody? And they were like, well, the motorcycle was behind a car. The car in front of the motorcycle was gunning it to get through the stoplight, but then last minute decided not to. So they slammed on their brakes. The motorcycle had gunned it behind him and rammed into the back of the car. Flipped over, literally cleared the intersection, and ended up on the hood of a car 60 feet away.
Oh my gosh.
Literally flew like Superman style, like 60 feet, crossed the intersection, landed on the front of a car. I mean, unfortunately, they were gone immediately, at some point in that journey. But I never forgot that. It's not scared me I've ridden motorcycles a few times. 3 kids now. I have other ways. I have other risky things that I do in life. It's called entrepreneurialism. My whole life is never knowing what's happening tomorrow.
Oh yeah.
What would I want a motorcycle for?
Yeah.
I don't need that.
My risk tolerance in my life is so high, and my daily existence is so risky.
Yeah.
That at this point I'm like, I'll come back to that when my daughter's 18.
So let's dive into this risky life of yours.
Dun, dun, dun.
We're beginning. We've already begun. But Will Acuff, thank you so much for joining me here today. I almost made a joke. I almost said John Acuff. Thank you for joining me here today.
Nice.
Just to joke.
Yeah, no. Because I'm not deeply insecure about it.
No,
what
I like
your
you.
Listeners can't hear is my head sarcastically saying, yes, I actually am deeply insecure about it.
Yeah, super insecure. But you're the less well known.
Very much so.
But Acuff, brother, not in my eyes. Because I'm sure he's a great guy.
He is.
If I never interacted with him, I'm totally cool.
Yeah.
We are friends. I like who you are and what you're doing. Yeah. So you are the better Acuff in my mind. But you do have a brother who's pretty.
Yeah, he's opening at the Ryman tonight for Dolly Parton. Like I was just talking to him on the phone. He's like, yeah, I'm doing like 10 minutes of like comedy.
Stand up. Yeah, because that was a pivot he made like a couple years ago.
Yeah.
He's
adding in. I wouldn't call it a pivot. I would call it additional revenue stream.
100%. 100%. There's no pivot.
Yeah.
He is now, author, speaker, comedian.
Yeah.
He was pretty virtually unknown like 10, 12 years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then he wrote this book.
I mean, not to me, but to other people, yeah.
Yes, to all of us. You're like, I'm sick of this dude already.
Yeah, I've been eating dinner with him for a long time as a child. Yeah.
So forget John Acuff. Will Acuff is here. So grateful that you are spending time with us.
Glad to be here.
Tell us your story. Like, I know that's a lot.
Yeah.
So whatever comes to mind when I say, tell me about the people, places, and things that shaped you into who you are today. Because I want to spend a good chunk of time on, what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and how it specifically plays out in the national area. So what made you
I give lots of damns.
You do give a lot of damns. Like, I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. When I heard the name of your podcast, I was like, I already love all of this.
Yeah.
So I'll give you kind of Google satellite view.
Yeah.
And then we can zoom in anywhere you want.
Sure.
Right. So born in Durham, North Carolina. My dad was like a campus minister who at the time I didn't realize how radical some of what he was up to. Like he had John Perkins, stay at our home in 1979 to come speak to like young evangelical Duke students.
Yeah.
But then he went to seminary, Gordon Conwell, back in the day up in Massachusetts. And the plan was like, go to Massachusetts, come right back to the South. But he got caught up in the early church planting stuff happening up there. And so started a church in the office of a gas station in like 1985. And this was like as unglorious as you can imagine, right?
How many years were you in Durham before you all moved up there? Because you're what, like 33, 34?
Oh, that's so kind. No, I'm 40.
I'm trying to be kind, but you're still young.
I thought you were like really being kind and then going to make like a note about
I know you're
moisturizer I'm using.
No,
like,
your face looks really good. All of it looks really good.
Yeah,
No, it was kind of a joke because you look and act super young, and 40 is so young. But I wanted to like really, really go young.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
So how young were you when you all moved?
Born in 79. The church gets planted in like 85.
Yeah. Okay. So you were young. You have very few memories of
like
Durham.
Very little memory in Durham. But we end up in Massachusetts. This church plant takes off mostly because it was a church, or my kid's view and my kid understanding of it was this was a church for people who were burnt out on religion, and were getting exposed to grace in new ways. Right. It was called Grace Baptist. Right. It was Baptist technically, but non-denominational in function. In fact, that was a big culture shock for me when I came back to the South and like mixed it up with like traditional Baptist world. I was like, I don't recognize this. That's a side note.
They wear their Baptist on their, not just their sleeve, their forehead, and it's everything.
Yep. And so in that context, it was seeing people come to grips with the gospel of grace, right? And like, oh my gosh, are you telling me like the core of this message is I don't do anything to deserve this, but yet I get this abundant mercy and I'm ushered into this deep, loving, ongoing relationship. And because this was kind of a missional vibe, right? In like a no collar, blue collar kind of part of like the Boston Bleed, about 25, 30 minutes outside the city. It always felt like we were having an adventure. Like my whole life growing up was like, man, we are having this beautiful adventure. So I also knew though that I didn't want to live in Massachusetts forever because New England winters, like I think you have a certain number of them. And then once you hit that number, you can stay, but you're going to go into greater and greater depression every winter, right? And I saw that happening, like grown-ups all around me. Like, I remember that guy used to smile. I haven't seen him smile since 94.
They're pretty rough.
Oh,
I grew up in New York and spent time in Minnesota. Like winter is like pretty rough.
Yeah.
It gets old after a while because it doesn't go away until like...
No, it might start in like mid to late October.
Yeah, and go till May sometimes.
Go till May.
Yeah.
Like I remember having spring break in high school, and it was like the Friday for spring break to start, and having to shovel out my car.
Yeah.
As a senior in high school, I was like, forget it. Yeah. So I ended up in the South for college. I went to NC State. At the time, thought I was going to do like college and then seminary right after, and really felt this calling to say like, what does it look like to be at a large, non-Christian campus and see how Christians are engaging with the secular world, right? Maybe how I describe it. Mm-hmm. While I was there, I was kind of turned off by some of the ways that how do I want to say this? Gently, I would say it as I was turned off by the ways that the mainstream kind of evangelical campus outreaches were disregarding people. One of those groups, coincidentally, was fraternities, right? Like there was a lot of this like mockery of like the things you value or what you care about is so awful, right? And I'd never been interested in that life at all, but I saw it actually at a skit at one of these ministries. They did a skit. Remember that Adam Sandler Conditioner's Better, No Shampoo is Better from his movie, Billy Madison, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right?
Yep.
They did that, but like beer versus liquor, and they were supposed to be like frat guys, and they were making fun of them at like a skit. And I look over, and there's like this guy with this fraternity hat, and I was like, what is he thinking right now? Like he's probably thinking, man, F all these people. Like, what is this, And so the very next day I pledged a fraternity to start a Bible study. And that's what I did in college. And it was not great, not well attended.
Give us an idea who came or who didn't come.
I mean, like nobody.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I might be able to persuade like 2 to 3 people if I could get good enough food, but over and over the conversation.
And they were just coming for the good enough food.
Yeah. It wasn't like, man, Will, you really opened my eyes.
Yeah.
Like said no one ever.
Yeah.
Right? But what it did for me was really showed me, oh man, like what does it look like to love somebody who's not your normal, like I'm not connected, I'm not getting a Jeep Wrangler, I'm not going to the DMB show with the frat guys, like that wasn't my vibe, right? But how do I love this culture in the midst of not being of this culture? Does that make sense? And it was a really interesting journey for me during college. And at the same time, started a band, started doing that. And so was thinking about seminary, but then was like, man, I want to do the music thing when I get out of college. So launched a new band with a group of guys out of Chapel Hill. They were all like, UNC musicians who were phenomenal. And I was like the one scrappy self-taught guy.
What kind of music was it?
I mean, like pop rock, rock guitars with harmonies.
Yeah, it was.
It was like, we would love to be the Beatles, and we're like, however far removed from the Beatles you can be, but still be playing guitars. Like that's the category.
Yep. It's like a genre they haven't really made it into anything yet, but you guys made it in your little corner of.
Yeah. We did our little thing. I mean, got to play live at the Apollo and not get booed off. That was like my high water.
Oh, that's a big deal.
Yeah, that was a wild ride.
Yeah.
So had a lot of fun doing that. But so that was like nighttime job. Daytime job was a research analyst at Duke University in health policy. And the way that came to be was my senior year of college. I would describe this as like a major pivotal moment for me, and what really laid the groundwork for where I'm at now. I got accepted to go on this trip led by an epidemiologist from UNC, and his wife was a general practitioner. And this was a kind of mission trip without any of the mission stuff. And what I mean by that is, like, I would say I had a great introduction to the Bible and the gospel of grace and things like that, right? Like some really core kind of old school, traditional biblical values. But I had no theology of suffering. I had no really deep theology of love of neighbor, right? Like I had done the normal, like, you're a high school kid, go build drywall in the hood, right? Like, I'm 40 now. You still don't want me building drywall, right?
Yeah.
You definitely didn't want me to do that at 15 when I was only thinking about like, how could I flirt more with the girls on the trip with me?
Yeah.
Right. And had no concept of the context of where we were doing that or why, or right. So this Kenya trip, we met for 6 months at this doctor's house leading up to that. And we would read, we were reading some theological papers, we were reading academic papers, understanding like how resources in North America play out to sub-Saharan African policy, right? All this kind of global economic stuff that for the first time started giving me a framework for like what I might describe now as like micro love of neighbor and macro love of neighbor. Micro, like how am I caring for my immediate neighbor or my immediate colleague at work? And macro, like what are the big issues and how am I leaning into them? And so we went to Kenya, and while we were there, all we did was sit with the local church and ask them like, what are you doing in the face of the AIDS pandemic? What can we learn from you? And so we didn't build anything. We didn't like, if you were trying to like write a fundraising newsletter off of this, you'd be like, we went and we learned and we sat with, and you'd be like getting no money. Right?
Yeah. Because it's not the traditional, for those of you listening that are not, didn't grow up part of a Christian, in a Christian culture, these mission trips were pretty useless. Most of them. Yeah. You raise money from your grandma gives you $1,000, your parents give you some money, your neighbors give you some money. You go to this place for 7 days. And the first 2 days are, let's get you, situated here. We'll have some this and some that. Then when you get to work on day 3, it's like painting a wall, as if these people can't paint walls. It's patting children on the head so you can get your Facebook, Facebook profile
Thank
picture.
God this was before social media.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. Because exactly. Because it would even be, and it still exists, but not as much.
Yeah.
And then around day 5 or 6, you're ramping down, and then you go, on day 6, you go to the coast and have like a retreat day, because the other work was so hard.
Yeah.
And then you go home, and that was a mission trip, and nothing was accomplished, but you got some good like stories and some photos out of it. So this sounds. All that to say, this sounds way different.
No, this was
than trips that I observed all growing up.
Yeah, and I would say like the best of those trips, from what I've seen for more mature young people, is that it sparks something in them to go deeper. But it doesn't feel like the trip is designed for that, right?
Yeah.
Like that feels like that just happened because of what's going on with that kid, right? In my experience, I was not that mature high school kid, So I completely missed any kind of opportunity on that front. And then on this trip to Kenya, I'd never been out of the country, and now I'm in like, I didn't stay in a hotel. I didn't stay with other people on the trip. I stayed for the first few days, at least, by myself with a Kenyan family with no running water on the edge of this slum. And I was like, this exists in the world, right? And it's almost cliche, like stupid, naive white boy has to leave the country to understand that poverty is a thing, right?
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that was part of my story. And came back from that having like a visceral experience of like, I am undone. Like things are falling apart for me and I don't know how to pick up the pieces.
So how did you do that? How did you process through it? Are you still doing that 15 years later? You know?
Yeah, even long. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because if you said it last year of college.
That was in 2002.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know what you're talking about. I've been there. I've spent time in 30-ish countries around the world. Most of them were working with people that are poor and impoverished. A few countries, I wasn't in that situation.
Yeah.
And
with World Vision, was that your?
Well, no, I did. I've done one trip with World Vision. Yeah, a lot of them were with. This is before I skipped college for 5 years. Yeah. I delayed college for 5 years and just traveled the world.
Yeah, did a
helping
gap,
and serving. Yeah, I did a half a decade gap. But yeah, I know that feeling where it's not the kind of trip we described a few minutes ago, where it's like you're being wined and dined. It was very much there was one time we went to visit a village and we had to ride bikes and had to get in this was in Zambia. And we had to ride bikes like an hour to get to a river, had to cross the river on this raft. There's crocodiles in this river, get across, go 2 more hours on a bike. So we finally get to this like little village, right? And I remember coming back from those trips and not quite knowing what to do with myself.
Yep.
Like physically, mentally, emotionally, everything.
Yep. That's where I was. I mean, I walked into, at that point, my parents had moved back to the South. My dad was a pastor in the Chapel Hill, North Carolina area. He moved while I was in college. And I walked into their house, which had never struck me as anything other than just like firmly, middle class, lower middle class. And suddenly it felt opulent.
Sure.
And I almost vomited. And it not like in a dramatic way, but almost just like in an instant kind of like physical reaction.
How can we live this way when there's that going on over there?
Yeah. Well, and then the cognitive and spiritual dissonance, right? Of if the Bible is true, like, and let's just take the New Testament. If this story is true, and here we have this like Jewish carpenter who is God in the flesh, who shows an obsessive amount of care about people's physical and spiritual wholeness, right? Like it's this complete thing. Man, I have been missing a big chunk of this my whole life. And I don't know what to do now. And just, the way I dealt with it is I wrote a lot of sad bastard guitar songs, drank too much, and read Kerouac. Like that's how I dealt with it.
Yeah.
And that's actually when I met my wife. She met me at like my most coming undone phase.
She's still with you years later. So
and it gets even worse. I won't go into too much detail. If any of your listeners want to buy me coffee sometime, I'll tell them all about it. But had a health crisis on our honeymoon. That you talk about the T-bone moments of your life where you're heading in one direction and suddenly you're T-boned at that intersection and nothing is the same after. I thought that Kenyan trip was that, but then this health crisis really was that, right? So that we came back in the first, month, 2 months of our marriage, and nothing was the same. It was like, here's a building on this property. This is your life. And suddenly you wake up the next morning and there's a tornado has come through in the night and the building is gone. And then as
soon as you get it.
Yeah. And the ground has been salted. Like, awesome. What are you going to do now? And that was the real work of all these things that I thought I was going to build about me and my life, and kind of putting myself, I've heard you on the podcast before talk about the ego and the role it plays, right? Everything we're engaged in. I wanted a balanced spiritual life, by which I meant I wanted me at the center and a little bit of spirituality like a side dish, right? a little bit of Jesus. But after that, it was like, no. This is the central. This is the meal. And anything else is going to be secondary. Yeah.
Well, we'll talk more about that when we get to how things are going in your life and what you're actually doing with your wife, Tiffany, right?
Tiffany.
And you have a couple kids.
Yep, Raylan and Penelope, both are through domestic adoption. Shelby County kids out of Memphis. Ben, we were there in the hospital with both of them. And Raylan, my 7.5-year-old, has autism. He is a child with autism. I'm learning people first language and making sure I live
That's
that
good. It's
out.
important. It doesn't seem like it matters in the moment, but saying it that way matters so much.
Autism doesn't have him.
No. Yeah.
Right. Like that autism doesn't claim my son's identity. Yeah.
Did you know that, have we talked about our failed domestic adoption?
No.
Well, I won't go into it. I don't even know if I've talked about it in the podcast. Maybe I've mentioned it in the 100 and something episodes we've done. I'm sure I have.
Congratulations, by the way. That's a big deal.
Oh, thanks, man. I think we're like at 130, and it's a fun. I don't know where we're going, but we're going somewhere.
Yeah.
We're headed somewhere. But yeah, our first, so about 2 years into marriage, my wife and I have been married for 11 years. This will be 12 this year. And we were going to wait a few years to have kids, and Becky was just chomping at the bit. She wanted to be a mom. She wanted to do it. And so we made it like a year and a half, and she was like, let's try. So we did. We tried and got pregnant right away. Turned out to be a very complicated failed pregnancy.
Yeah.
A molar pregnancy, if any of you guys want to go Google that. It's so rare that when we went to the doctor, we went to the hospital to get it checked out, and we had met this doctor who said, I know what it is. Like, this is weird, but I know what this is. And he said, go tell him it's probably a molar pregnancy. We get to the hospital, and we said, I think we've miscarried, and we've been told to tell you that it's a molar pregnancy. And the doctor was like, a what? And they had to go for like 30 minutes, study up on this thing, and come back out. And then they took us back, did all the x-rays, and they're like, yep, that's a molar pregnancy. Anyway, it's pretty complicated and potentially harmful to the body. And so they said, you can't get pregnant for a year versus the normal like 6 weeks after a typical miscarriage. So we were going to adopt our second child. That was our plan, was to have one of our own and one adopted.
Yeah.
And so
one biological and one adopted.
One biological. That's also language. Yeah. One biological, one adopted, because they're both our own.
Yours.
100%.
Yeah.
No, that's super good. I love this language stuff. So we decided to flip flop and started the process to adopt domestically. Still expensive, as you know.
Insane.
As you know,
insane.
You'd think that like, oh, Memphis is 3 hours down the road, this will be easy. No,
not at all.
So we were about 7 months into the 7 months from saying yes, we're going to do this, and we got chosen by a birth mom. Very unfortunate situation. Young girl. They were very quiet about things, but from what we got, she was raped, and she's 13. And
oh my gosh.
So we were super sad, but also like, okay, we can give this baby a really good life, and this girl needs to have a life. Like, she needs to finish school and, do all those things. She's really young to be a mom. So, at that point we were $12,000, $13,000 in, and just, we were ready. We're ready. We drove down there. The baby was going to be born. We had a car seat and a pack and play in the back and all the clothes and everything. We drove down, got to the hospital about an hour after the baby was born. We tried to get sooner, and the baby came a little early. Got there, met the baby, met the birth mom, met her mom. Everybody's excited. Everything's going along. Our lawyer was there with us. And 3 days, those were maybe the worst 3 days of my life. No, that's not true. Very hard 3 days, because it was up and down. Like, right from the get-go, the birth mom started asking to see the baby, and then asking again. And every lawyer and every doctor will say, if this baby's going to another set of parents, like, don't, like, say goodbye, because you're gonna, these maternal instincts are gonna kick in.
Yeah.
Anyway, long story short, that's at 71 hours, literally, she decided to keep the baby. And we,
heartbreaking for everybody.
Heartbreaking for everybody. Yeah. I still think about this baby all the time. Becky doesn't, and that's totally fine that she doesn't. I think about her all the time, and think about the birth mom, who is now 21 and has an 8-year-old.
Yeah.
I hope that things have worked out, but I can't. I mean, it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that adoption is a thing in the world.
Sure, that's hard to deal with.
Of the sorrow of human existence.
Yeah.
Like.
Regardless of how the child is up for adoption, whether it's death of the parents or I'm too young or this wasn't in the plan or whatever.
Yeah. Part of our journey has been like, the systematic landscape of poverty and racism in America and these other big kind of machines, right, contribute to this in a way that is so heartbreaking and mind-boggling that it's much, much easier, as Ta-Nehisi Coates might say, like, to stay in the dream. Don't wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you say so you're a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
Speak for a second on behalf of Christians and we'll get into more of that work here.
Yeah.
How am I going to say this? Speak to people that aren't Christians, and on behalf of Christians, speak to what it looks like to be wholly pro-life and pro-people, right? Because there are so many. We have the 81% that voted for Trump. Because he is quote unquote pro-life. He was not pro-life, or to say it another way, anti-abortion until a few years ago when it benefited him. Yeah. He was pro-choice his entire life. And yet we have, this very clear, crystal clear cognitive dissonance when people say things like he is pro-life or that there's a pro-life movement. But they're ignoring. We won't even get into immigration and refugees and all that. Let's just talk everyday situations, poor people, how we are punishing them for being poor, and how we don't. I mean, we're not caring for them. We're not caring for them wholly. We're not fully considering what's going on in their world that causes them to do a lot of the things that they do to survive.
Yeah, So I would start with, I firmly believe in this old school doctrine of the Christian faith that, called the doctrine of the image of God, or Imago Dei.
Imago Dei.
And this belief that humans are created in such a unique and almost inexpressible way of reflecting God's glory, right? The Bible's not very clear on what that means, right? It doesn't say, and this is what follows, right? But it says we're created in the image of God, and we somehow uniquely reflect His, if you think capital C creator, lower C creators, right? And at the same time, the Bible says that we are scar givers and scar receivers, right? Like we are the walking wounded. And so the way I kind of position my understanding of all this is we are all of us broken and beautiful, right? And if we start from that posture and realize like my brokenness or my beauty might express itself in different ways, the journey I've been on, the situation I was born into, my family background, whatever, right? That starts me on a position of humility rather than arrogance. However, if I accept the American triumphalist, vision, then I am my achievements. Then I position myself in a meritocracy, right? And if I do that, then I can only ever see my own achievements as my own things, right? Which thereby you've already denigrated the image of God in yourself, right? Because you're saying, I didn't receive this, right? You're acting as if you gave breath in your lungs. You didn't. That was a gift, right? And so when you position yourself in this meritocracy fashion, then you expect the same out of everybody else, right? And you get into this bootstrap mentality, and you get into this like there's never an excuse or whatever, right? And so you stop actually trying to know people or move toward them in mercy and long-term compassion, because you don't give yourself that either, right? You're only as good as what you've done for yourself lately. And it's almost like this, I think about it like a quarterly sales report, You're almost like, what have you done for me lately?
We keep like a ledger. We keep check marks and tabs,
and we
have little
apply
black
it to ourselves. And we apply it to our communities. I mean, so that's one of the ways that I think about it. That that if we are actually viewing life as a gift and every breath as a gift, then it gets really hard to be arrogant towards neighbor, no matter what their situation is. And so then, I mean, I think about it in the language of Jean Vanier, like the accompaniment language. Like then one of my goals as a follower of Jesus, is to accompany people on their journey in life, right? Saying, come with me as I go to Christ, but I don't have something other than that which I'm getting from him, right? So now we're journeying together, which again, in the nonprofit space, and I know we're going to get into this, that automatically takes me out of the savior role or the hero position, right? Because I'm saying, no, like I'm going to the same source of life that I think you need, we need, this source of healing, this source of redemption. I'm not saying I am that source of redemption, right? And often in the nonprofit space, especially in the Christian nonprofit space, we treat neighbors as if they're in this like post-apocalyptic hellscape, right? And we set them up as victims, right? And then we set up our donors as the heroes, right? Your money can save the day for this kid, right? And we word it in such a way where it's like, I'm affirming your broken worldview that you have your life together, donor, right? And then, hey, kid in the neighborhood, I'm affirming what the world is saying about you, that you're worthless.
Yeah. And that you're not going to be saved unless I come in and do it.
Yeah. And think about what we're doing there. Where from a Christian perspective of, again, this broken and beautiful, I'm telling somebody with money that they don't need a savior because they are their savior, right? And I'm telling a kid or, someone from a underestimated community that they don't have agency. They don't have creativity, passion, drive, right? But if I affirm that we're created in the image of God, they have all those things. I don't need to give them those things, right? Instead, as a nonprofit, we're coming alongside and saying, how do we build bridges to opportunity? The talent is already there. It just needs a way to express itself.
It's powerful. I love that. 2011, you and Tiffany co-found Corner to Corner.
Yeah.
Walk me through it.
So we moved into a historically low-income neighborhood in Nashville. If you're familiar with the area, Dickerson Road, there's actually a punk rock song about Dickerson Pike at night.
Really?
Yeah.
What does it say about it?
It basically imagines two like kids from Brentwood or Franklin, more like well-heeled suburban areas, getting lost and ending up on Dickerson Pike at night. It's a hilarious punk rock song.
Who sings it?
Honestly, I can't remember.
Well, show it to me later. That
it
sounds
had like
fun.
9 streams. It was not a well-known tune. So we moved into that neighborhood. Simultaneously, Tiffany, my wife, started working at the men's prison, Charles Bass, and then later she'd move on to Tennessee Prison for Women, and she became a former offender job training specialist, like certified by the Department of Corrections to help former offenders transition back to stable employment, right? We're not talking dream jobs, but we're talking one anchor in the midst of that storm as you're coming home. So she was doing that behind bars. And I've shared this story before, but like we were so joyfully naive, right? We're just like, we don't know any of the answers. We're just leaning in with questions, right? And at the same time, I'm getting my master's in biblical studies. I'm working in the tech industry. Tiffany's behind bars, and we're volunteering for all this stuff. And one day she comes home from work and she's like, hey, work was weird today. And you're like, huh? Right? When your wife works behind bars, you're always like a little,
Yeah, hope something didn't happen.
Yeah. What are you talking about? And it wasn't until that moment that it dawned on me that like part of her work release job was actually by herself taking a van of behind bars gentlemen back into the neighborhood to do job interviews. I thought like in the movies, there's an armed guard and like the gate and the grate and like all this stuff. No, right?
Just her.
Just Tiffany in a van. And most of the time it went really well. But this day, she said she felt something was up, right? In Christian language, we'd say like she was listening to the Spirit, right? And she was like, something's off here. She turned back around and brought the van back onto the compound and asked the guards on duty to search the van. And they found zip ties and a cell phone and like duct tape. Yeah. So who knows how that day ends if Tiffany wasn't like listening.
Shit.
Yeah.
Man.
And that's how I found out she wasn't doing this with a guard.
Yeah. Why would they let her let's just back up for a second. Yeah. Did she have a weapon? Like, is she?
No.
And these are prisoners. These are incarcerated men that are
transitioning from, to be minimum trustees.
Yeah. But still, they've
Yeah.
It's
Various
one
backgrounds.
woman with a bunch of dudes.
Yeah. So, I say that to highlight, one, how much of a badass Tiffany is.
Sure.
Right? She's awesome.
Yeah.
And two, that we were just really, we were leaning in every way we could, but we also, this was a world we didn't know much about, right? And didn't even know the right questions to ask, right?
Sure.
But so the beautiful thing that started happening, like that's just one little story. Most of the stories are beautiful, right? Was neighbors, folks started coming back from prison and they were our actual neighbors. So these relationships started forming, right? And so in 2011, we started planning and praying, like, what would it look like to start what we would describe as like a gospel-centered ministry, but that wasn't doing the hero vibe, right? Was instead going, how do we become good allies of the community, right? And so we went to a local rec center right around the corner from our house and just said, what can we do together, right? So not like, hey, we've got the solution, we're coming to give it to you, but really in this posture of humility, just going, how could we be on a journey together? And I'll never forget, like, because we wanted relationships to form, right? Like, I think programs are good, but long-term, like life transformation happens through long-term relationship, right? We all know that at gut level. Like, I look back at like playing soccer in high school and I'm never like, thank God I learned how to do a corner kick, right? Never said that.
Yeah.
But I did say, oh, thank God that one coach saw me and could engage with me at a time where it was tricky to talk to my dad, right? And that we formed this relationship. And so we wanted to start a nonprofit that had great programming in partnership with the community, but was also an opportunity for relationship. Hence the name Corner to Corner, right? Like trying to connect, the CEO's corner to the dealer's corner, right? They're both offices, right? They both have something to give and receive. How do they come on kind of removing some of the barriers to both be teachers and students together? And so we were wrestling with those questions. This was like more philosophical and methodological than it was like practical, right?
And when did you pull the trigger and actually get going? I mean, you were already doing stuff, but like, when did you say, okay, this is more than, a side project or whatever, and make it a full on, this is what we're doing, for better or for worse?
I mean, so the first thing the rec center said was like, teach Tiffany stuff that she's doing behind bars in the community, right? Little known fact, Nashville has the #1 incarceration rate in the United States per capita, according to the Brookings Institute. So really high incarceration rate per the size of our city. And so they were like, we need this right here. So we just started teaching that. And it was Tiffany's thing. And I was just like the guy who was trying to help students get into the program thing. And that went on for a while. And then the staff were like, can we also do something with kids? Reading tutoring, Reading's the biggest predictor of whether a kid will hit the school to prison pipeline on the educational side. Right. There's other factors, but on the education side, that's a big one. And so we just started organically, taking almost like a software development approach, like this iterative, let's try something and tweak it and try something and tweak it. It was just funded out of ourself. And then we had one local church start giving us a stipend, not like to live on, but just to like buy materials, so we finally became a nonprofit in like 2015. And started trying to learn how to raise money. And in 2016, went full time. So fast forward to kind of where we are today, 3 core areas of focus: education, economic development, spiritual growth. They're all pretty separate things, right? And what I mean by that is like we have a program called Script to Screen, where kids learn how to fall in love with reading through their love of movies. So they start by like watching Black Panther and reading the script at the same time. And to see like a kid's face where he reads a line of dialogue and then he sees it happen on the screen, it's like the first time you saw a 5-year-old see a magic trick, like there's just this sense of wonder that the world could have this in it, right? And then from there, they start learning how to write their own scripts, and we bring in videographers and sound engineers, and they teach them about the technical side. And then the kids make their own YouTube movie, right? And then we do a red carpet premiere where the kids are treated like it's Comic-Con.
Oh, that's so cool.
Right? And at no point in that curriculum do we have an overt, like, and on week 5, here's the Bible study part, right? And the reason we take that approach is we want to build long-term relationships. And if you add in socioeconomic and racial lines, right, and you talk to some of my neighbors, they will tell you, man, Christians, they come in on these mission trips or they whatever, right? They parachute in, and the vibe is they don't actually love me. They want a notch on their Jesus belt, right? And it almost feels like I'm trying to sell you on a low mileage Jesus.
Yeah, sure.
And so our approach has been to say, no, like we're here for the long haul with you as neighbor. We do have a spiritual growth component if people are interested in that.
That's what I was going to ask. Like, is the proselytizing side of it optional? Like, if they say, I have no interest in it.
It's not even...
it's not like you put them out and say, okay, well, we can't work with you.
Yeah, we lock the door. We change the keys.
You're just saying, this is an important part of my life. I want to share it with you when the time comes and as a part of our relationship.
And we ground everything we do in the context of the call of Christ to love neighbor as self is unbelievably radical. Like I just think about it, like from the minute my feet hit the floor in the morning, right? I am building the day around me to provide me with as much resources as possible, right? Like that's just the function of our life.
Yeah.
And Jesus says, yeah. That circle is good. It's just not big enough. Like he doesn't say stop loving yourself. He just says take that same devotion and apply it to your neighbor. Don't just care about your kids, care about your neighbor's kids, not just your financial future, your neighbor's, right? And so to me, these are expressions of the call to love neighbor as self. And if people want to know more about why we ground it in those kind of ideas, then yeah, we have like last fall, we did an awesome, we reviewed Genesis to Revelation in 4 weeks, like for anybody who wanted to come. But it's not a part of upfront programming or woven into any programming. So
you have to do this to get this sort of a thing.
Yeah, not at all. Which has meant, though, I will say, in the South, there have been a lot of Christians who say, you're not Christian enough for me.
Oh, sure. Of course.
And the phrase I've heard is like, mercy ministry should be an adornment to the gospel, to like the real ministry. And I disagree. I think that's a wrong.
So just translation for that, like serving the kids and the people you do is kind of an add-on. It's an extra. The main thing you should do is proselytize.
Yeah.
Is what so many people would communicate
well,
here in the South.
And I would say, in a lot of ways, I was raised with the idea of loving your neighbor means that you are converting them, right? Yeah. And I don't disagree. Like in terms of like, I do think loving my neighbor means also telling them about where I ground my hope and my joy.
Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't? We all do it, whether it's Jesus or pizza or whatever.
Favorite
like
movie.
whatever.
Yeah. So absolutely, I'm not saying that's not a part of my life, but I am also saying that I think there's really good biblical arguments. I mean, like take Ephesians 4:28, this letter that St. Paul writes, where he says, "Let the thief no longer steal, right? But have a job such that he's able to give back to the community," right? Well, that assumes a living wage, right? So on some level, a Christian community reading that passage should say, oh, wait a minute. In Nashville right now, the living wage is $22.65 an hour, according to MIT. And a lot of our neighbors are only getting $9 an hour jobs. Right?
Yeah.
So how do I, if I agree with the words of St. Paul in Ephesians 4:28, how do I become a part of making,
bridging that gap?
Yeah. How do we make economic justice and economic development a core Christian idea, right? And so, I mean, another one of our programs along those lines is the entrepreneurship program called the Academy, where we have helped launch over 211 entrepreneurs, all at like local rec centers, family resource centers. It's this affordable, accessible curriculum that is now, on average, those graduates are bringing back in $5 million into the neighborhood economy. And we found out from the State Economic Development Office late last year that we're now the largest producer of minority entrepreneurs in Middle Tennessee. And we're on track this year, if the growth continues, to be like the biggest in the state.
Let's spend a few minutes there. That's incredible.
Been crazy.
Like what kinds of things are they building and doing and growing? Like what kinds of businesses or just anything?
All over the map. I mean, like I'm wearing one of the jackets from one of our graduates. It's like an aggressive looking money bag, eating money.
Yeah.
But he has got Hungry Brand clothing, right? And he made this for my birthday. I love this.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So he's got a clothing brand. I ate lunch today at one of our graduates' restaurants called Coneheads on Dickerson Road. And it's chicken and waffle concept, but in a waffle cone. And it is delicious. And he was one of our graduates, our first graduates in 2016. We have other folks who have started. We have a Vanderbilt PhD candidate who's launched her language, speech, and pathology clinic out of our program. We have another, a mom of 4 who launched a boutique and vegan, vegetarian ice cream brand, right? Because she wanted to give her kids a healthy alternative to store-bought ice cream, but do it on a budget, right? One of my favorite recent stories is we had a guy named Tony who was the first African-American fire captain named in the city of Nashville, who wanted to give his daughters a model of what it looks like to build something you own with your own hands, right? So he came through our program and launched a company called 360 Inventory Solutions that will inventory your business or your home so that in the case of fire or flood, which he was seeing all the time at his day job,
Sure.
you can get your insurance payback quick, right? And so he's launched that business. He's already he's a hero as a, captain in the fire department.
Yeah.
He's a hero to his daughters. And then he comes around to the academy and he calls me with tears of joy in his voice, right? And says, hey, I just made my first sale and I want to donate 100% of it to the academy with Corner to Corner. And I want to come do it with a giant check and really encourage the next group of students. And he shows up on class one night with his own giant check, right? To pay it forward. And so now he's a hero to the community.
So cool.
So it's
how is
all
that
over
not
the
all
map.
your work though? Like, how are you managing that? I mean, that seems like it could be it. It could be all of what you do every single day. So how do you and your team manage
I give so
that?
many dams.
Yeah, apparently.
I mean, so the way we've built it out, so we've got Script to Screen is really growing. It's a kids movie making program. On the educational side, we're giving that most of our focus now. On economic development, we mothballed the former offender training because as the economy in Nashville heated up, neighbors weren't asking us to get help doing a $9 an hour job, right? And so I don't ever believe a program is the point. The people are the point, right? So we mothballed that program and poured our economic resources into entrepreneurship. So that gets a big chunk. And then the spiritual growth stuff is much more organic, that it just happens relationally over time, that it doesn't require as much programmatic attention.
Sure.
But the way we build that out, I'm a big part of the agile software world. If any of the Scrum Master crowd is listening, I'm Scrum Master, agile product owner, and software development. And so we approach the nonprofit life with that kind of agile vibe. And so we function on a Trello Kanban system and just plug it away. Yeah.
I need your help in my life with all my shit that I'm doing.
Yeah. And we're both Enneagram 8s.
Yes.
And the iterative approach is good for 8s.
Yeah. No, I know. I'm feeling it more than ever with all the things that I have going on. No, that's super. So who, Script to Screen, who can get in that? Anyone? Or do you, how do you pick? Because that seems like there's some intensity to that, right? If they get through it and they make you got to do the red carpet and all that. So who gets to be in that?
Yeah.
Or anybody?
Yeah. So we have one site that's open to anybody. As long as parents sign you up and you come, right? That's at the McFerrin Park Rec Center over in East Nashville, where we first started out 2012. And then our 2 other sites right now are through partners. So like at Magruder Family Resource Center, we're partnered with Preston Taylor, and their junior high crowd is plugged in. And then we're down at JC Napier, another set of housing projects in Nashville, with the Harvest Hands crowd. But the way that functions is we're looking at scaling that to 10 locations. And so we do leadership training twice a year. Volunteers, partner sites can come out, get trained on the curriculum, get equipped. We line up volunteers, who are from the Nashville film and kind of audio world, to help run that. And then we have this big, huge red carpet party. And the same with the academy now. We have 7 sites for this spring all over the city. Got our first Murfreesboro site launching. But we do leadership training where graduates or local business leaders come get certified to lead. And then we pay them as 1099 contractors to honor their time, right? But what we found is consistently the vibe in the entrepreneurial world is high growth, right? Silicon Valley mentality has just seeped into everything.
Yep.
And we say, no. Because what comes with that vibe, right, is your idea is what gets you in the room and what keeps you in the room, right? And so you're only ever as good as that idea.
Right.
Right. And so we say, no. Again, going back to that doctrine of the image of God, you're in the room because you're a neighbor.
Yeah.
You're in the room because you're an image bearer, and we want to love and serve you well. Right. And so the ideas will come and go. And this business training we're giving you is meant to help you pivot and grow and change ideas. Right. And so we've formed what I would describe as like an empathetic community of journeyers. And when I first started talking about this, most high growth people were like, it sounds too touchy feely.
Right.
It'll never work, And now, like,
it does.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's scaling through that kind of model of community-based leadership.
You've touched on, I was going to bring up the core values of Corner to Corner. You've already addressed a couple of them: love your neighbor as yourself, and ministry of economic development, ministry of consistency. And talk about pass the spotlight. What does that mean for you all?
Yeah, so there's no way to talk about pass the spotlight without talking about, like, how do you dismantle systems of racism?
Let's go.
Right. Which again also loses us money in, like, the Christian fundraising world, right? I've had moments where somebody's like, we want to do this for you guys, but we just feel like nonprofits are talking too much about race. And then we're like, well, thanks.
Yeah.
This has been a great lunch.
We're not going to stop.
Yeah.
So
high five.
Yeah. Pay for my lunch and we're gone.
Yeah. Or maybe not even pay for my lunch. Yeah. So pass the spotlight, that concept for us means we're not building something. I'm not building the Will show, right? We're not building something that is about us. Instead, so like a functional way of doing that is, like, as soon as we had our first graduating cohort of the academy, we paid the writers of the curriculum to come back in and train our graduates so they could be on stage leading, right? And so that it could replicate that way. So, like, if you come to our graduation, our last one had over 500 community members. It is like a block party. It's not that sad. Like, if you've ever been to a nonprofit thing in the basement of a church with, like, bad finger food, right? You can smell that room right now.
Yep. Yeah.
Right. It is not that, right? There's a DJ, you walk in,
it's a party.
Yeah. Massive party. Graduates are showing their products. There's their food and drink they've made, like, it's this joyful celebration. And part of the reason we're doing that is because we want to, again, model, there's no victims here, right? There are image bearers doing amazing creative things in the world that we're just helping to amplify, right? Like, that's it. And so if you watched that night, I would be on stage for 2 minutes, right? But the rest of the whole thing is the community on stage for an hour and a half, right? So that's kind of what I mean by pass the spotlight.
Yep.
But then to take that further, what we also mean is there is a real problem, especially in the Christian nonprofit world, of having employees on the ground be maybe of the community, right? Black or brown neighbors. But when you get into the executive leadership, and then when you get into the board, suddenly it gets whiter and whiter, right? And I think I'm not trying to say anything negative about white people, right? As a white dude with an awkward mustache. What I am trying to say, though, is we don't divest ourselves of power on purpose in order to create more space for other voices, right? And if I understand the call of Christ to die to self, I think part of what that means is shutting up. Dramatic pause.
Yeah, dramatic. Yeah, listening.
But also not assuming that I have the voice of leadership in the room or the smartest idea, or, you know what I mean? Like, which means being quiet, which means inviting others to the table. And so, like, where we hope to go with this is, like, we hired one of the graduates of the academy, Shayna. She's phenomenal, to be the director of the academy. So she ran it all last year. She's the one who scaled it to 6 sites this past fall. She's the one who, our first year we had 13 graduates. Last year we had 93, right? Like, she is doing that. And I'm
huge growth in 1 year.
Yeah, that was over 2 years, right?
Well,
She's having insane. I want to get out of her way, right? So I'm telling her now, and I've told my board, Shayna should be the executive director. Like, we should build a clear path of leadership for me to take a board seat, Shayna to become, the executive director.
How is that being received by the people that, fellow other board members, or the people that you're talking with? That's kind of crazy talk.
Yeah.
For the founder of an organization to say, here, my position should go to somebody that used to be at the bottom, and now they're rising up, and they should have that role.
Yeah, I mean, so
Or are people saying that's amazing?
some people are instantly going, "That's awesome, we love it." Others are going, "That sounds like you're trying to destroy your thing," you know. But I think what it's opened up for is an interesting dialogue of, do we really believe that everyone is capable, right? Or everyone has ability? And when it comes to, like, I'm not saying Shayna is going to do things exactly the way I'm doing them, right? But I am saying she's going to bring something powerful and different to the table, right? That will take it in directions that I wouldn't have imagined, that will in and of themselves be good and beautiful, right? And at the same time, we're not saying like this is where we're stopping, because that would be tokenism, right? We're saying from top to bottom, how do we figure out how to do this well? And we might fail in the trying, right? But we're adding into that this idea that you and I have talked about, not on the podcast, of we don't raise money off the pity story, right? We don't do a banquet fundraiser, right? Because I don't know how to get past the genre of it, right? Like if I say once upon a time, you instantly know I'm telling a fairy tale, right? If you get invited to sponsor a table or a seat at a banquet, you instantly know you get to bear the role of the wealthy person in the room, right? I would dare say you get to be presented as the image bearer of God in the room, right? And at some point in the night, the pity story will come on stage. Either somebody actually sharing how I was lost, but now this nonprofit saved me. And you can be the savior now by your money, right? So write the check. Or it's a good video, right? And it's not
Sarah McLachlan singing "In the Arms of an Angel" in the background.
Yeah, well, we've gotten better than the Sally Struthers "Eye and the Fly" stuff from the 80s, right? But it still has that when you peel back the layers, right?
Sure.
And so, like, we're doing the divesting ourselves of power in unique ways and bringing other voices to the table, while simultaneously trying to raise funds in a way that we think is in line with the gospel. And what I mean by that is, like, we are created in the image of God, and at the same time, we are broken, right? Like, that is humanity. And I don't want to say to one group, you're beautiful and you can be a savior. And the group that I'm meant to be walking alongside of, you're worthless unless this money comes to the table. Instead, because that creates pity, that creates distance. It raises money effectively. But we want to wrestle with, how do we still raise money? How do we keep the lights on, but create opportunities for empathy and engagement and moving closer together in the messy nuance of that? And know that it's not going to be efficient, right? Like, just upfront own that.
So you probably would agree, or you would probably say that you've raised less money than you could have.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
I often so if somebody goes, hey, we're going to this like nonprofit fundraising seminar, right? I can almost bet money that they're going to teach you how to put your donor on stage as the hero in some way, shape, or form. But I think we're seeing more younger millennials and Gen Zs go, that doesn't feel authentic to us. Like, that doesn't seem true. But we haven't built a new model. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like we're in a stage where we need to dismantle some of the things that the baby boomer generation built.
So I worked in nonprofit for 14 years.
Yeah. Does this all sound really familiar?
Oh, well, yeah, extremely, in every way. I am skeptical of the effectiveness of most, not all, but most nonprofit work. Versus kind of, there's kind of there's another way, social enterprise, a lot of different, the Thistle Farms is of the world and the Ables of the world. And I just named two amazing, organizations here in Nashville. So many more. I don't really need you to convince me, but convince me that there's still a need for nonprofit work in our cities.
Yeah, this is good. So let me first talk about impact, and then I'll talk about kind of larger question, do we still need nonprofit?
Yeah.
So on the impact side, one of the things we've done, part of my side hustle, because nonprofits don't, make a lot of money, is I do research assistance essentially for Vanderbilt doctors, help them learn how to use like agile methodologies, right, for their research. And because of that, we've been able to, from early days partner with some of these behavioral scientists to say, can you help us make these, pre and post custom surveys that get at a field of research called the social determinants of health, right? And that's an interesting field. It's really nerdy, but it essentially is saying like community health has multiple layers, and we want to understand all of them, right? Such that your anxiety levels, right, about providing for your family, they're going to impact how often you get sick and how often you visit a doctor, right? Like they're starting to trace those lines. And so on the academy side, we have this custom survey pre and post, and we're able to show 7 out of 8 of our markers, right, are from a statistically significant measuring tool, are shown to be markedly improved, right? So in terms of impact, I think like we can demonstrate like real world impact.
Yeah.
We are decreasing financial anxiety. We are increasing your confidence about the future, right? Which is real world behavioral changes. And then on the economic side, we're actually able to show like people are making this kind of money, right? Which turns into 4 new tires so that you keep your day job. It turns into a down payment on a home, right? Or a kid's college savings fund for the first kid going to school, right? So like real world things. So that'd be my answer on the impact, right? And we would not be able to do that if I was charging, I think, what a normal business training program would charge. We have others in the area that charge anywhere from $1,500 to $5,000.
Yeah, it's not cheap.
Yeah, not cheap. We're charging some, like the cost of materials. It's like $25 to reserve your seat and $100 to pay off the book. Past that,
anybody can figure that out if they really want to.
Yeah. Exactly. You got to have some skin in the game.
Yeah.
Like whatever. But I don't think outside of a nonprofit, I don't know how we get that, right? So that'd be one argument for the nonprofit. The other side is I think we lose something major when we aren't calling societies to be more generous for no other reason than they should be in a position of sacrificial humility towards neighbor.
Yeah.
And so to me, there will always be a place in the market for nonprofits who are helping people to rally around issues that are just going to be meaningful for a city to embrace as part of its identity. Yeah.
Those are both really good arguments. So now we have hundreds of thousands of nonprofits asking for our money every year.
And most of them should die.
And most of them should die. No. So that's what I'm getting at is how
do we suss that out?
I know. Yeah. I would never tell certain people this, but like I know I can name organizations I know right now that you're not doing anything really meaningful, like deeply meaningful.
Yeah, you've learned how to play the game.
You've learned how to play the game, and you should just go.
Game. Yeah.
Oh yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And so this is my question. In light of me affirming your joke, and I don't think it's a joke that maybe not many of them should die and go away to free up the.
It was a joke for all my friends in the nonprofit world,
but it wasn't a joke for me that I think so many of them should to kind of like let's free up the playing field a little bit.
Yeah.
How do we? People are hearing. They're hearing from you today that this is legit. What's going on with Corner to Corner? I mean, the entrepreneur stuff, the script to screen. There's real work being done here. This is a real good place to put your money, friends.
Yeah.
But how do people know that? What are some key things they can look for as a nonprofit leader? You've been in the game for a decade.
Yeah.
Like what can people look for? Whether it's ideas or keywords or like beware of this. Like I've seen this go. What can people look for?
Well, I'll tell you where
as they're trying to decide where do they put their little money they have left over.
I will tell you where I give my money. Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Or what I look for.
Sure.
So one, I don't trust anything that talks about systematic poverty without also talking about racism. If we're talking about the United States.
That's solid. Yeah.
Right? So an example of this, like I won't name names, but there's certain nonprofits and kind of books that I've read where they talk really intelligently about some of the complicated features of poverty in America, but never mention, redlining policy or how this neighborhood incarcerates more black men than any other category, right? Or sentencing laws and the structure around that, right? And to me, that's a little bit like if I gave you a book on how to survive on Mars, right? And nowhere mentioned that there's no water, you'd be like, this book was missing a key element.
Very key.
Right. And so I would say that first off. And then I would decide what matters most to you. in terms of, do you want to put your money in a place where mercy is demonstrated for no other reason than mercy? That's a great value. Just own it, right? There's some good things that are doing that. If, however, for you, life transition and like outcome is more important, ask to see the data, right? See, and I would also say, see who's already partnering them, right? Partnering with them. So that's some of the ways that Tiffany and I, gauge who we're giving. And then, I mean, personally, I meet with whoever I'm going to give. Like, that's just how we.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah, like I want to, because I would also say I don't give a dime to anybody who positions themselves as a savior. It instantly makes me go,
and so many
I don't
times
trust you.
you can't figure that out from a website or a promo video. So
I
trying
actually
to
think
get
you can.
Okay.
So like translation. Here's I won't, again, not naming names. Recent video. This is in the last 10 months, right? Christian nonprofit. Their fundraising video described the neighborhood as a toxic environment where there were no positive role models. Right away. I'm done.
That's bad.
Yeah, right. But if you're not looking for that language, you can watch this video with the inspiring music and the story of the young man, right? And by the end of it, you are so emotionally engaged that you stop hearing what they're really saying, right? Yeah.
That makes total sense. And I want to we'll talk offline about that video.
Well, what's funny, I'm doing, so Lipscomb University, their film department, Melissa Forte over there, she's awesome. Her and I are put together a project. We're presenting at this like college nonprofit thing on dismantling the pity story. And we actually filmed a video of a friend of mine who's a former Five Deuce Crip, had the life of the streets, all the things in the dramatic, after school special, right? We filmed just a free range interview for like probably 2 hours. And we're challenging her film students to make 2 different edits. Make the nonprofit edit and then make the real edit, right? And then we're going to present them side by side. We're going to change the B-roll, One's like gritty streets, desaturated. One is like, positive Nashville in color, all these things. And see how people respond to both. And we're going to really challenge this group of, nonprofit educators.
That's wild.
To like tell a different story.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you can. You can tell a lot of that from, I just think you're going to really get the story when you sit across the table from somebody.
Absolutely.
Over a meal, a cup of coffee, ask the hard questions, see them squirm or not squirm, see them, look off and look down and, not.
Yeah.
You you should be able to, with so many of these organizations, you can have access to somebody, especially if you're saying, I want to be committed to you all.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure.
I promise you, if you reach out to most local nonprofits and say, hey, I want to be a monthly donor, they're going to get coffee with you.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah. I'm going to get coffee with you.
Yeah.
Will at cornertocorner.org.
If you're in the Middle Tennessee area.
Or not, I will drive. I mean, the monthly donation dollar amount, gets me to leave the state.
I love it. I love it. Let's talk for a minute about how long it takes to start things. Because I noticed your timeline earlier.
Yeah.
On the website, and you said it, 2011 is when it started.
Yeah.
When it started.
Yeah.
And you didn't become a nonprofit until 2015, 16, 15.
Yeah.
And now we're 2020, and you're still saying things like, I will drive for a monthly donation. Like, we want things so quickly.
Yeah.
And in reality, they take so fucking long.
Yeah.
They take so long to, and this is why people like peter out, and they like, they come in with, they come in with this passion, and I'm going to do it. And this is a thing that's important to me, whether it's nonprofit or otherwise. And we can't stick with it. We can't stick with it because it was too hard and it took too long. And I thought it was going to be this way. And my social media following isn't growing, and whatever it is.
Yeah.
So talk us through, like, how and why did you keep going all those years before it even became a real, what we would think of as like a real organization? Nobody's given to your shit if you're not a nonprofit, right? Because they're not getting they're not getting their tax deduction at the end. So like 4 years of really feeling it out and and asking questions and sitting in silence and listening before it actually became a thing. Talk about that.
Yeah. So I'll talk about that, and then a new thing we're starting now, and the timeline related to that.
Yeah,
right? 'Cause
sure.
I think it's interesting. I think passion gets you in the game, right? But learning to have a lifestyle of long-term suffering, right, is what keeps you in the game. And I don't even just mean that about a business vision, an entrepreneurial thing, or a nonprofit. I also mean like your family.
That's everything.
Right?
Marriage.
Yes.
Kids.
Like there are
neighbors.
some things that don't bear fruit unless you stick with them for decades. Period. Right? And the message I think that we're embodying in almost in every form of media is like, no, 9 seconds from now I can have exactly the thing I wanted.
Yep.
Right? And this, I can't remember if this was Wired Magazine or New Yorker, but there was an interesting article about research showing like what of the Fortune 5,000 companies were started by 20-somethings or 40-somethings, right? And the bulk were in the 40-somethings, right? The myth of the Silicon Valley, like 23-year-old who starts this thing, right? That's part of
huge cash injection, grow quickly. You're at 5 employees. Next month you're at 20. Next month you're at 50. You hired everybody. Everything looks pretty, and you're moving, and you're growing, and you're building. And then 1 year later, you're out of cash because you spent it all on catered lunches every day and everything. Yeah. Versus what you're saying, like start with nothing. Start with build one of whatever your thing is, sell it. Then you have enough money to get the the materials for 2 of them, and then you go on from that. And,
yeah. I mean, endurance is almost more important than anything else.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and so the way that's played out for us, like, I mean, Tiffany and I, we started, this was purely out of our passion of like, how do we wrestle with these questions of, if we believe this story about Jesus is true, we must live this way. We don't know how. Let's start learning. Right. That kept us going for the longest time. Because each new question we were getting answered, each new relationship was like a brand new, beautiful discovery, right? And so that part of it, that ongoing adventure was enough to fuel us, right? And then we officially became a nonprofit because we were like, this thing is growing past our ability as a couple to sustain it. And I believe firmly, like I am called to be Tiffany's husband. I'm called to be my kid's dad. I am not the only one called to love neighbors through the vehicle of corner to corner, right? There are tons of people who can be involved in that. And so we really quickly, at that point, we're like, how do we get more people engaged? How do we give away more control? How do we let more voices into this, right? And that's when we started learning you have to learn how to do fundraising to sustain some of that, right?
Yep.
Because once it goes past you don't have, you're giving away to some degree like your man hour, right? Like before you could always donate more of your man hours. But when it's somebody else's man hours, that comes with $1, right? You need to pay your people, right? I mean, part of the thing that drives me crazy in the nonprofit world is we've accepted this like 1960s ethics guidelines about philanthropy that says like philanthropists should be broke themselves in the midst of this.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that if like, I mean, you take the guy who did all the huge cancer walks and races and awareness, right? His TED Talk is phenomenal on this.
I haven't heard it.
Oh,
Send it
man.
to me later.
I'll send it to you.
I don't think I've heard. I've heard so many TED Talks.
Post it in the show notes.
Yeah, I will.
It's
I will.
So good. But he argues like, we take, the average Stanford MBA in a couple of years out of graduation, he's going to be making like, he or she is going to be making like 400,000 plus, right? They give $100,000 away. They are philanthropists and their community celebrates them, right? Meanwhile, that same graduate, he goes to work for a nonprofit. If he makes 100,000 or more a year, he's critiqued.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And condemned as wasteful, right? Even though the brain power there, the training, the knowledge for that man or woman, the creativity, right? So like we have this really broken, lopsided thing. That was a side note.
But it's an important side note, but keep going. Yeah, that's hugely important. We do that all the time. We do that every day.
Yep. And so like I tell people straight up, like we don't own a building. We're going to spend money on our people. If you don't like that, then go give your money elsewhere. Because I want my people to have stable lives. I can't be about economic development and put that on the
treat my
backs of
people like shit. Yeah.
Like that's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane.
Yeah. But all the time people are like, I want to give to a program. I don't want to give to a person. And you're like, well, I don't even know what to do with that statement. Yeah. It's like, cool. You buy camera gear for script to screen? I mean, I guess that's not a person.
People are so weird.
Yeah. What's legitimate, what's not legitimate.
Yeah.
So I'd say endurance is the big thing. And then not setting your expectations against whoever is your hero, right? I think that's super important. Like we all have a hero in that thing, right? Whether that's a podcast or, I mean, like some crazy nonprofit that just crushed it or whatever, right? Don't compare yourself to your hero. They probably took a long time to get there. And if they didn't, if they had a lightning strike, okay, how often does a lightning strike a man riding a shark, right? Like doesn't happen very often.
Yeah.
And you should view that in that framework.
As a complete anomaly. It's not going to happen to you. Get to work.
And so like we launched a new thing this past summer that you and I have talked about, because we won't tell the pity story and we feel like we've a little bit handcuffed ourselves in the fundraising process and we're learning new models. We realized that no one had launched something that harnessed the power of the short-term rental marketplace like Airbnb in order to fund innovative local nonprofit work. And so we launched our own as a pilot called Stay for Good, right? Like when you stay here, you're staying for good. And the whole mission is short-term rental, but long-term impact. And so an Airbnb owner signs up with us. We feature them on our website, right? We give them links out so that they get more bookings. But we also give them a physical and digital signage that says like to the millennial or Gen Z traveler, hey, when you stay here, some of your dollars are going to change neighborhoods for the better, right? Which is a super important message. Like we want more companies that are transparently doing good, not in some like convoluted way that you trace the line and somewhere it dies, right? But like in this immediate way, like, oh, if I stay at this Airbnb in East Nashville, then one of the kids who is not reading at grade level is going to be in this program that will get them back on grade level and help them discover their voice. So we launched Stay for Good. Well, I pitch it at this business's mission conference. I'm getting heat. I'm getting some buzz. There might be some investors, but then all of that died, right? And we're in the phase now where we have users on the platform, but we are one day at a time going after new partners to come on board. We're learning how to pitch better. We're learning how to communicate this mission. And I think we'll get there, right? I think this will end up being something that goes nationwide. But if I had
global, baby, global.
I mean, hey, yes. Global, I love it. But if I had the mindset that I was given in the Silicon Valley world,
you'd have already given up.
Yeah, this should be in 6 months. Oh, really? Well, you guys are only generating like $1,100 a month for local kids to do the script to screen program.
Not enough.
Not enough. I thought you'd be at 10K at least per month by now. You know, and I literally have people say that to me.
Yeah,
and
I don't doubt it.
I'm always like, man, that's awesome. High five. Good luck in your life.
Yeah,
I'm going right. So I guess my answer to that question, a very long answer, would be endurance matters more than passion. And you have to find your true north. Because if the outcome is your true north, forget it. You should quit now. Like true north has to be something more substantive than that.
Yeah.
For me and my family, that is Jesus, right? And that is the adventure of getting to know neighbors in a deeper, more beautiful way than I ever could have imagined.
There's like so much that we could talk about there, but for the sake of time, before we wrap up, I have a big question at the end. You should start sweating now. It's a big one.
I love it.
But before we get there, what do you want people to know? Where should they go? What do you want people to do coming out of this conversation? What do you want people to look for?
I mean,
you've mentioned script to screen, corner to corner, this Stay for Good. Like, what's the socials? Where do you want them to go? Where can they give if they want to?
Yeah, cornertocorner.org/donate. It's that simple. Like, would love if you have an extra $5 or $500, like do that, please. That really has an immediate impact. If you're in the Nashville area and you want to learn more about this, email me, will@cornertocorner.org. Like, I would love to invite you to our red carpet premiere where the kids are celebrated, or the next graduation, which is coming up in May for our entrepreneurs. I'd love you to come and taste and see. Right? It's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's another thing to experience it. So that'd be another call to action. And then if you're interested in Stay for Good, go to stayforgood.co. We couldn't afford the M, right? Like I tried and they were like...
So it's probably like...
it was like $30,000. Yeah. I was like, that's awesome. We will not
We'll go with
that.
co.
Yeah, we're going to stayforgood.co. Go there, check that out. If you're in the Nashville area, sign up. Like, I would love to have you.
Yeah.
on the
So
platform.
good question. So no one outside of Nashville right now can be on Stay for Good, or how does that?
Not yet. The vision for this is, right, we want to fund innovative local nonprofit work.
Yep.
So we're in early talks with like some folks in Boston. So if you're listening to this and you're like in Tacoma, right, then we would love to come to Tacoma. If you're an innovative nonprofit, reach out to me again at that email address. Because the way this is going to work is we'll partner with one nonprofit first in that city.
Yep.
We get to 100 users on the platform, and then and only then we'll start to add a couple more, but we'll max out at 4. Because we don't want this to be smile.amazon.com, which gives you $9.
They get a check every 9 months for $1.36.
Yeah, it's like this bought us erasers for Q4.
Yeah.
That was great.
Yeah.
No, we want this to be, where we're giving hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to our on-the-ground partners. Like, that's the vision for this.
I love it.
Because we want to fund risky work, right? Part of the nonprofit thing, part of what you know from your work in that, you learn how to play the game, right? You get these 3-year grants that are robust but allow no flexibility. And then even if something's working, you can't change it, right? You have to stick to the grant and the grant reporting. And then we wonder, oh man, we have the same intractable social ills that they were dealing with 50 years ago. And it's, I think, in part because we won't fund things that might fail, right? And so like we want to fund things. If 7 out of 10 of our things failed, but 3 of them became grand slams and life change, let's do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that's powerful. Okay, all those will be in the show notes as well. Here's the last question.
The sweat induced one.
The sweaty question. That's weird.
Yeah.
That sounds weird. There are no sweaty questions here.
Yeah.
Someday you're going to die, many years from now, because you're so young and good looking.
Yeah. And I use the right moisturizer.
And you use the right moisturizer. He's so moisturized, guys. You should see him. But someday you're going to die, and for some odd reason, I'm still alive, and I'm giving your eulogy. So everybody's there. Tiffany, the kids, corner to corner, script to screen, Stay for Good, all the people you've been able to work with and influence and, and serve and love throughout the years. They're all there. And again, for some reason, I'm giving your eulogy. I am speaking words that are meant to celebrate and mourn your life and legacy.
Eulogy values versus resume values.
Eulogy values, resume values. Yes. What am I saying on that day about you?
Yeah. Man, that is a sweat-induced question. My hope and my prayer would be that you would say, this is a guy who loved and served his family really well. Start there. I mentioned my son and his special needs, and that has really reshaped the nuances of my ambition in the world.
Yeah.
I don't think I can love and serve neighbor well if I'm not first loving and serving my son well, and also embracing the gift of my own limitations. So I would say, first, loved and served his family really well. And I would say, second, did everything possible to live a life of love toward neighbor and never stopped being curious and adventurous about that. Like never got static. Yeah. And I think third, maybe extra bonus point would be like, this guy was weirdly consistent, right? Like I think the older I get, the more I find that consistency is important. The way I treat my wife, the way I treat my kids, the way I treat my neighbor, in season, out of season, whatever suffering I'm going through, if I'm able to lean in love toward other and consistently do that, like just beautiful things happen.
It's amazing. That would be a wonderful life. Well, I hope you get all of that. I think it was Josh Radner and I talked about.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is that where you got it? Yeah. You've been listening.
Podcast.
Hey guys, Will listens to the podcast.
I do.
I hope you're listening to every episode.
Absolutely. I mean, and the fact that you had Josh Radner, aka Ted Mosby, on, like,
yeah, it's pretty fun.
That's solid.
But I will be completely honest with you right now. I am as happy to talk to Ted Mosby as I am to talk to you.
Thanks, man.
I'm serious. Yeah. Like I don't tell Josh Radner or Chelsea Clinton or Rainn Wilson this, but like and other people that I've had on that have more of a platform, like I love their stories. I love what they're doing in the world. I don't have anybody on just to have them on. They're all people that give a damn in so many ways.
Yeah.
But I am kind of using them. to bring in more people because you don't have, you're not your famous brother who's opening at the Ryman tonight for Dolly Parton, right?
Yeah. And so he's not going to say in the midst of that. And also,
hey guys, I want to take a break.
I want to take a break.
Yeah.
Hey, my brother's on Instagram at Corner to Corner.
Yeah, and you need to go check him out. Right. And so I kind of use Chelsea Clinton in a weird way to get your platform some more visibility because I believe in what you're doing.
Yeah,
I think it's great. And I love the consistency. I love that you guys have stuck to a place and are staying there for the foreseeable future and not saying, if this doesn't work out, we're going to like dip out and go somewhere else. No. I love that you guys have taken a learning posture. That you haven't come in, you primarily work among people of color and you're coming in as white people. You could easily.
Well, technically, I'm the only white person in my family. Tiffany is white Latina.
Yes.
She's, Mexican American on her mom's side.
Yep.
My daughter's Afro-Latina and my son is black.
Yes.
So like.
You are really the only white guy. So you better.
I'm not kidding. Yeah. And Tiffany drives a ton of anti-racism work in life, right? Like actually go to our Instagram page and watch her video where she went and presented to the Davidson County, like Nashville School Board a week ago.
Oh, wow.
To argue for school resource officers like cops in schools to get training to stop arresting special needs kids because that's happening at this crazy level. And Tiffany goes in there as a badass. I mean, like,
is that recorded anywhere? Like, is that
you
probably
can listen
public
to
record,
the whole
right?
thing. Yeah. She just posted what they posted, right? And it like you have these moments when you're married where you're like you see your spouse in a brand new, fresh, beautiful way, and like this pride comes to bear. Yeah. And I watched that and I was like, my wife is amazing.
Yeah, like
this is incredible.
Yeah.
So go watch that. Would be my call to action.
I love it. I love it. Go watch. What is that? Your personal Instagram?
No, that's Corner's Instagram because part of her work is
dismantling. Yeah, I mean, it much fits in there. I just didn't know if it was your personal one. Will, thanks for this. This was awesome. We'll do it again someday.
Much, man.
Yep.
Maybe over cigars next time.
Yeah, we almost did that because that's where you said, okay, let's end with this. I try to be healthy in so many different ways in my life, but I really like to smoke cigars and pipes. Same here. So you said you're trying to like just tone it, like dial it back a little bit or what?
Yeah. So getting really transparent and my life insurance, if you're listening right now, please turn this off.
They're not.
Yeah. No. So I've been passionate about cigars since I was 18 years old and just have consistently loved them. But when they're in a healthy place in my life, they're an occasional thing, right? To slow down and reflect and maybe read a good book.
Yeah.
When I'm really stressed out, they become an every other day kind of thing.
Yeah.
At which point you start buying the cheaper and cheaper stuff.
Yep.
Which at some point you realize like, oh, this is a nicotine hit for me.
Yeah.
And it stopped doing the thing that it was supposed to be doing.
Sure. Which was just pure enjoyment.
Yeah, like just basking in the goodness. Like in Christianity, they talk about the new heavens and the new earth, right? That one day everything from all cultures will be perfectly in place, right? And tobacco will be there.
Yeah.
Like cigars.
100%.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there will be no life insurance to try to
no cancer.
Get around and no cancer.
Yeah. We'll be like, I won't have to get this oral cancer screening because of my cigar habit every year. Yeah.
Well, that is a wonderful way to end this podcast talking about oral cancer, mouth cancer. But no, this has been and on a high note. This is wonderful. Thanks so much.
Thanks, man.
A million thanks to Will for joining me on the show. I hope you enjoyed listening to Will as much as I enjoyed chatting with him a few short days ago. If you have any questions or thoughts about this conversation, you can find me anywhere on social media at Nick LaPara or at Let's Give a Damn. And make sure to follow Corner to Corner on Instagram at Corner to Corner and on Facebook. Search for Corner to Corner Nashville. And you heard Will. Hit him up, will@cornertocorner.org, if you want to learn more, grab coffee, or anything else. He seems like a really open book. You should hit him up. And as you know, they're doing hugely important work, so support them if you can and however you can. Lastly, you heard him talk about his love for street photography. If you want to take a peek at his work, check out at Out East Photos on Instagram. Out East Photos on Instagram. Before we go, I want to send a special thanks to the Russell Hotel in Nashville for letting us use their podcast studio to record this conversation. If you're ever in Nashville and looking for a place to stay, consider staying at the Russell. Their rooms are amazing, and your stay at the Russell will help the homeless community in Nashville. How, you ask? Through their Rooms for Rooms program. A portion of the money you pay to stay there will go to help several amazing organizations in Nashville do their work more effectively. That's a win-win for everyone. So check out the Russell at russellnashville.com. You've heard me talk for far too long today. Our time together has come to an end once again. This show was created by me, edited by Chad Snavely, and the music is by our friend Propaganda. Share this episode with people you like and with people you don't like. Just make sure you share it. We put a lot of time and love into these podcast conversations, and we want to get them to as many damn givers as possible. It will take you fewer than 15 seconds to hit the share button in your podcast app, copy the link, send it to a friend right now. I love you all. Can't wait to spend time with you next week. Peace.